this particular scene, Emily and Moira are discussing their own individual healing processes and how they're planning on moving forward. And they bring up Iris slash Irene. And Moira asks if seeing her helped, if confronting her helped. And Emily's answer is kind of a non-answer. And Moira, I think, does more for Emily here than June had prior. Because Moira compels Emily to explore how Iris slash Irene could potentially be helpful for her. How she can help with not just Emily's healing, but every other handmaid's healing and the healing of a nation.
Right.
By compelling her to at least visit her and say, like, one of the ways that she could help is to testify. Yeah. The inner workings of Gilead, it's one thing for a handmaid to say it. And this is where, court systems are problematic. Maybe take women at their word. Maybe take women who have been traumatized at their word. But Moira is intelligent in this regard, and compels Emily that they're probably more inclined to believe Iris slash Irene's testimony because she was a woman who was part of the infrastructure. So they'll value her word.
It's not even, I didn't take it so much as that they would value it more, it's that she would know more. She would just have more knowledge than a handmaid would of the Gilead infrastructure. Like, even in the way that, like, we're curious as to who exactly the aunts report to, she would have a better idea. Like, that whole aunt initiation that we get from the Testaments, she can speak to that part of it and at least just say the people that she would know would just be higher up in the structure than the people that June would know, except for the fact that, or handmaids in general, June's special because she was in a special house with special people, and here we are.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a really good point, because I took it as like, they're not going to believe us because we're victims of abuse, and our mentality is going to be skewed. But they'll believe this woman who was part of the abuse structure,
right?
That's speaking out against it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
This makes me realize that if this woman truly wanted forgiveness and truly wanted to repent, she could go to the American authorities, Canada side, and say, "Hi, I'm Iris. I was an aunt. I perpetrated war crimes." If she really, really wanted to go down the Jesus route, that's what she would do. She would turn herself in, and she would leave fate to do whatever it will do. It might work in her favor because maybe she could say, like, "Hey, got all sorts of info.
Yeah.
Don't hurt me."
And she could, I mean, if Serena could get immunity for being under duress of the state, I would imagine that the aunt could too. Like, there wouldn't be much of a difference there. If they were gonna, obviously the difference would be that Serena was offering up Fred on a silver platter, and I can't imagine that she's gonna have that kind of intel. But just in terms of, like, if they do give these kind of deals to people, I would think that they would give it to her for the same reason.
That's a reasonable assertion. I would definitely think the same.
Did you guys notice the lights in the distance, the circle lights? It reminded me of those holes again, the box holes. It made me think that Moira and Emily also still keep Gilead in a box in their heads, or they're still in that Gilead box to a point. Which it's pretty clear because they're discussing it, right now. And ultimately, we see what Emily does with this.
It does stand to. Yeah, no, it does stand to reason, because anytime that you're a victim, anytime that one is a victim of that sort of abuse, they're always going to carry it with them. But one of the ways that people do cope with it is to put it into a psychological or proverbial box, and only open it when they're in a spot that they can deal with it and that they feel safe enough to deal with it. And Moira and Emily feel safe with each other, so they're able to open up that box and have that discussion with each other. And as time progresses, the box goes from being a 1-ton concrete and steel box to a leather box, to a cardboard box, to being made of single-ply paper. Like, it takes time for these things, but trauma victims are not only, like, not only should they, but like more often that they're allowed the opportunity to be able to compartmentalize that and open up that box when it's a good time for them to deal with that trauma. So yeah,
That's a really good way of putting it. And it ties in really nicely to the overall like theme of what healing looks like for people.
I also liked how the choir started to begin singing while they were talking about this healing process. And
it was really beautiful.
Really, really was like this gentle, soft choir music that was coming through as they were discussing how Emily could compel Irene to be helpful, and not just to her, but to every other handmaid and to everyone else. And it was so gorgeous to hear. And then we cut to Emily driving out to visit Iris or Irene, and the choral music is continuing, and it's starting to become a bit louder and a bit more swooping in its way. And as Emily turned into the driveway, I just wrote, "She's dead, isn't she?"
I did the same thing.
Oh, thank God it wasn't just me.
No,
Oh my
I did
gosh,
the same
I was so
thing.
in a different place in that. I was not even. I was having like my own version of traumatic flashbacks.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Emily drives out to Iris. She's dead, isn't she?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Because like you could hear like the shift in the music went from being this beautiful lifted choral music to almost this like lifted funereal music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like the way that the light was streaming in, and it all felt very angelic, but in a cold way.
Oh yeah. I do know how dark I went in such a different place, and it was so dark. I was so scared. I was so happy to see that dead woman hanging from a tree. That's how terrible my thoughts were. Like, I know, it's terrible.
Okay, Marjorie,
Wow.
talk to us about the darkness.
Marjorie,
So
welcome to the dark side. We have pillows here and like lots of whiskey.
Yeah, we do.
I hated where my mind instantly was like, oh my God, that's where they're going here. Because I know it's like the end, it was coming up, and I don't know what was going to happen. And you're right, that music shifts and it's ominous. And then it's such a beautiful shot, and she looks exactly like she did when she ran over the Guardian. So like that's all I'm getting. That's all I could think of at that point is like she's driving again, and then I'm like, ooh, and it feels erratic and things feel wrong, and the light is scary, like it's bright, and it's like you can't see anything clearly. And so like in my mind I feel like she's moments away from an absolute breakdown. And the only way I see this going is her running over this aunt. And then I feel like, oh my God, she's going to get in trouble for this time. Like, now they put her in jail for this. And it's all going to be June's fault because June just shoved this woman in her face, and this wasn't what she wanted. And I was like, there are so many repercussions for that terrible, brash move. And I was like, I was dark. So then when I was like, oh, she just killed herself, great.
Marjorie,
it was really
I love you
perfect.
for that.
I love that you picked up on the fact that it really kind of echoed her running down the Guardian in season 1.
Yes.
Because my notes, it says, Emily leaves and props to her for not running down any of the first responders at the scene. That's
Right?
immediately what I thought of. Immediately.
I was so scared that was going to happen. And
Same.
she was
It's
going to go
absolutely
to jail for manslaughter.
So it's interesting that you say that things weren't very clear. Like it was bright and not very clear, because I saw it as bright, but I took that brightness as clarity for her.
Mhm.
I saw it
Yeah,
as
it
like
could
a
have been.
breakthrough for Emily, that she's and the music made it seem lighter to me. Like I felt like it gave her a lightness and a clarity, this whole scene. So it's interesting that you kind of like saw this whole like other thing.
Rabbit hole real quick. I was like, at this point, my mind was like, I figured out where it's going. And then when it didn't go there, I was like, oh, and then it all looks different when you rewatch it that way. Like
You like
I
dunked
see
your
how
head
it's
and pulled it back out.
clear and beautiful, but I was just like, oh my God, she's going to kill people and it's all June's fault. That's really where I was really, truly thought that was going.
Admittedly, though, like I did think the same thing. Like, so, like I knew that like Iris or like Irene was dead, or would be dead by the end of the scene. But very much like the way that the camera was like planted on the hood, pointing at her or pointing at Emily, and like she's in this total control position, and like the way that the light had shifted like to be like intensely sunny, but we all are used to how sunlight looks on snow. It's a very cold light, and it does give this foreboding feeling. So yeah, I'm 100% on board with your read on this. It makes me so happy. One of the things though that really struck me about this scene, other than like the chorus continuing to sing throughout the gentle, soft music, was as Iris was hanging, she has the two slippers. One has fallen from her foot. And then they show like different parts of her body as she's hanging. And the one that really caught my attention was her hand. Her flaccid hand hanging and turning gently, and the sunlight catching through her palm. Did you two catch that?
No, not at all.
So I definitely noticed her hand, but I didn't. My brain again went somewhere else, so I wasn't really looking at it as like each individual part. I got nothing from the red slippers other than like, that's weird, but nothing.
Handmaid's colors.
Yeah, I'm just like, okay. I mean, she's walking on Handmaids. Okay, fair.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of where I took it too.
But the hand thing specifically just reminded me of the Colonies woman that Emily poisoned, that wife, Marissa Tomei's character.
Interesting.
Oh.
So they remember like the way that her hands were like, I can't really see my hands, so
Oh,
I'm doing this,
kinda-
but
they
you
made
know,
her a
like she was
scarecrow.
propped up. Yeah, so and I feel like it was that's what that hand dangling that like that of the aunt. It reminded me of that situation. And I don't really know what I take from that other than Emily was involved or it was present for both, but I don't know.
I didn't even think about that. Thank you for making me think of it. What I thought of though was with like her hand just here, so you can see it, Michelle, was just like a dead hand, as one does, flopped about, and it just like was slowly turning in the breeze, and the sun, as it was setting right about here, and it was reflecting right through the palm of her hand. And we've talked before, going back to light theory, and Marjorie's rabbit hole theory that Scarlett and I like just followed her like full head force, and I'm still team light theory on this, is that the light of the natural world is reflective of real truth. Like we see artificial lighting representing Gilead and natural lighting representing like the outside world, and with this hand just dead dangling after she's hung, and the sun is just setting inside her hand, but she can't grasp it, is Iris was so close to being able to like vindicate herself and bring herself into the light and free herself from the artificial like world of Gilead, but she just couldn't grasp it. She was so very close.
Oh, I love that.
And she'll never be able to.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
And morbid. And also, guys, light theory kids. Like, we should...
I did the 3 circle lights in this episode. I'm good on light theory and lamps.
Fair enough. I fully expect, like, I saw that and I was like, Marjorie's gonna like kind of have a field day with this one, and like I didn't write a lot of notes on it.
No, I'm trying to like keep it not in every scene, because when I re-listened to that episode, it was a little much talking about it in every scene. So
okay,
I just try to pick the big ones. So I'm glad we picked different ones, and it worked out well.
Yeah.
But one of the things that, as we were talking about this, makes me realize how it could be a parallel to the death of that wife, is because we've seen Emily deal with a little bit, I guess, guilt of a little bit of guilt once she reached Canada, of like asking Moira if she's a terrible person. But I don't think most of her issues are really steeped in a ton of guilt. I think she was pretty much okay with her actions in the colonies. Mm-hmm. And if you parallel the scene of Irene with the scene of that wife and Emily's involvement, although obviously she didn't do anything to this woman, I think it was kind of a sign that she's not really gonna bear this woman's death on her conscience. Like, she's good with this. Like, she drove away, and I'm like, nope, I think she was good with it in the colonies, and I think she's good with it here. She's like, this is not on me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think she felt totally okay. And she could legit say, this is not on me. But also, she
Yeah.
could legit say that, I don't know, her attack on Aunt Lydia wasn't on her either because Aunt
Yeah.
Lydia deserved to be attacked. I mean, she's her perpetrator of abuse. Go nuts, Emily. Same thing with the wife. Wife had it coming. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, she just can't lay claim to this one.
No.
Right.
But she's going to feel good about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that if you parallel those two scenes together, this one with that one, what the fuck am I saying? Can I try that sentence again? This one with that one.
Strike that.
Jesus,
Reverse.
let me try some words actually. This one and that one.